Hi everyone, it's a quarter after 1 a.m. right now, so that seemed like a good time to record one of these. Welcome to Book Club. I haven't done one of these in a long time, so I just thought we'd play a little catch up. I don't know how regularly I'm going to keep this series up, but some people did miss it, so I wanted to do an update on it since it's been a long time. So for this edition, I'm going to be covering a lot of the books I've read since the last installment of the series. Not all of them, but these are some of them. That I thought you guys might be interested in. So let's go on. First is The Notebook slash The Proof slash The Third Lie by Agota Kristoff. I'm labeling it like this because this is actually a collection of three novellas that are all rolled together into one bigger book, one complete work. And this tale is harrowing. It's dark, dramatic, and I could not put it down. This version of the book was nearly 500 pages, I want to say, and I could not stop reading it. I just plowed right through it. It's notably a book that I was reading for research because this is a book that inspired a lot of elements of the video game Mother 3. Shigesato Itoi, the director, well, not the director, the former director, and the scenario writer, loved this book, and it's even where the characters Klaus and Lucas get their names from. Um, I absolutely loved this, and I can't wait to read it again. This is one of my favorite books after having read it, and I would highly recommend anyone to check this out. It was fantastic, and it's amazing how much Agota Kristoff fits into just portions. There's so much I could talk about that only happens in the first 20 pages or so. This was fantastic, and I'm trying to not talk about it too much because I don't want to spoil it, but it's a wartime story that turns very somehow even darker the further you get into it. I could not recommend this enough. This is probably my favorite book that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Next, I read The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I read this back in, I want to say middle school. Yeah, I read this in middle school, and I've seen the Francis Ford Coppola film. And I gotta say, revisiting it, I didn't like it as much as I did the first time. I really liked it the first time I read it, and that's why I wanted to revisit it. But after having revisiting it, I didn't love it as much. I don't think it's bad or anything, but I found a lot more of the dialogue a bit corny, though I did still overall find the characters very enjoyable, very likable, and I could recommend this modestly, but it's not very long, so you can plow through it in a couple days, maybe one day even. But if you're just looking for something to read, I could recommend this. But as iconic as it is, and as important to American culture, its influences, I didn't find myself enjoying it as much, though I did find the character stuff between the characters uh, still very engaging, and that's some of the best parts of it. Just more so understanding how they feel about each other, even more than necessarily what they're saying to each other. I read Dracula by Bram Stoker, the original novel. This is the edition I read, the Penguins Publishing version, and it was good, nice and simple. Honestly, it's what a lot of people don't know is it's written in the form of letters, and of the characters writing letters to other people, to each other. It's interesting. It's a nice, interesting setup. It's very verbose, and it's nice and dark and spooky. It has some nice creep factor to it. But I mean, it's really long, and as much as I found it intriguing, I think I respect it more than I necessarily enjoyed it. So if it's something you think you'll like, you should at least check it out. I was torn between reading this and Frankenstein, which I still would very much like to get to at some point. But yeah, for now, I'm going to have to hold off on that. Dracula, very good. Very respectable work. Uh, this is something I could actually see people having to really work their way over the language barrier because it's not spoken in like some decrepit old English language or something, but it is something where how the dialect is different, and you have to kind of get used to that to be able to understand what people are referring to sometimes. Then I read Monkey King, otherwise known as Journey to the West by Wung Shan. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed this. It did. It took me quite a while to get through this. It's not even that long, But for some reason, it just took me forever to get through this. A lot of story is packed in this book, and it's kind of crazy because the actual story of it doesn't even start until, I want to say, like 80 or 90 pages in, because there's a whole prelude to the story that's just about the character Monkey himself. This is one of the most influential pieces of literature ever conceived, particularly to Asia. Any anime you can think of has some sort of relationship to this, and it's been very influential in others as well, other Asian cultures and Indian cultures as well. And I read quite a bit of this in high school. I actually had my school library order in for me, and then I was reading it, and I wasn't able to finish it before the school year ended. But I was really enjoying it, and I just put it down for some reason. I was really into Dragon Ball Z at the time, and I decided to pick it up again, especially seeing how freaking cool this cover is. It's one of my favorite covers for a book I've seen in a long time. One of my favorites of all time, easily. And I was just at the bookstore trying to figure out what to read next, and I saw this and was like, I should give this another shot. I wanted to give it another shot. This looks awesome. It'll look great on my shelf. That is kind of how I decided it. So as long as it did take me, though, I did really enjoy it. There's a lot of great humor in it. There's a lot of interesting locations and imagery. Though, without spoiling it, there's some wild stuff in this book, like some truly out there crazy stuff you would not expect to be in here, that you'll find shocking just in the way they phrase certain things. And those who've read this might know what I'm talking about. There's one specific instance that really caught me off guard, and made me laugh just at how absurd it was. Okay, next. Cinema Speculation by Quentin Tarantino. I received this book as a gift as a Christmas gift, and I had not even heard of this. I didn't know Tarantino had written a second book, and so I was like, well, it's something to read. I didn't have a book at the time, and I was going on vacation for like a week or so. So I was like, this will be something easy to plow through. And plow through I did. I found it much more engaging than I was expecting to. I thought this was going to be something I was going to read a chapter or two of, then drop. But, Tarantino's dialogue carries over to his work in this book because it was still very interesting to read. It's a collection of essays on a bunch of different films, primarily that he really likes. Particularly the chapter on Taxi Driver is really well written. Obviously I'm going to say any chapter on a movie I had actually seen was interesting to me, but the Taxi Driver one was, his interpretation of it is very interesting and engaging, and I really enjoyed that. The Great Escape, Dirty Harry, great chapters, as well as the autobiographical segments of the book. This is the only nonfiction book he's written so far. I believe his next book is also playing into that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood universe. So this is his only nonfiction book so far, and it has a lot of chapters that are just straight up autobiographical, and those are easily some of my favorites of the book, some of the most interesting. And I lent this to a couple people who also seem to enjoy it. So if you're interested in film at all, if you like his movies, you'll probably like this, actually. But again, that's probably gauged by how familiar you are with the films he's talking about. But someone like me, who just loves movies no matter what, is happy to talk and listen to people talk about movies even I'm not remotely familiar with. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. Then I read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. This was recommended to me by Monkey Paula. She lent me her copy, in fact. And it was one I had been putting off I want to say I put it off for like a year reading this, just because there were other books I wanted to read. I wanted to read this at the beginning of 2022, but I was caught up in, I actually had COVID. So I was isolating and was reading, and because of that, the only book I had on me at the time was Catcher in the Rye, which is when I read that, and I really enjoyed it. I talked about that in another video, though, however. But anyways, I loved this book. I liked it. I didn't love it, actually. I respect it and found it really interesting, though. It's sort of a classic murder mystery regarding the titular dog, told from the perspective of someone with some sort of neurodivergence. And it was very interesting to me. And I got it. I saw what it was going for. But once you get past that, I found it a lot less interesting because, well, interesting it remained the whole time, but engaging less so, because I kind of had a feeling I knew where it was going, and I was right about where it was going. And as well written as it still is, and as well realized as the characters, the relationships, everything are, I was just a bit disappointed that I was able to kind of call where it was going. It's a little bit formulaic if you've seen a story told about a person with a condition like that before. Uh, but I mean, as far as that goes, other than that, the average person, you'll enjoy this. It has some nice comedic moments, some really dramatic, dark moments. The scene that takes place in a train station in particular is one that really affected me, and I really was gripped by. It's a really easy, breezy read. It's only about 200 and something pages. Like, it's really short. I was able to read it all in just a day. So if you're looking for something light to go through, this is something that's really easy. Has some illustrations in it as well, a couple that are drawn by the character, which are interesting. So if you're looking for something nice and breezy to read, here's a good one. One book I just realized I had forgotten to put in this slideshow is The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. I had read a few Kurt Vonnegut books last summer, and I had to take a break because of that. So I put off reading the copy I had, even though I had gotten it in July, I want to say. I put off reading it until, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months maybe. I can't remember quite when I read it, but it was sometime around the time I read this, before or after. And that one I enjoyed quite a bit. I read it along with the audiobook, which gave it a whole nother experience. I really had a good time reading a lot of these books. I'm talking about reading the book while listening to the audiobook enhances the experience so much for me, and I would highly recommend trying that if you're trying to get into reading or something. So yeah, Sirens of Titan was very interesting. It's something like the Notebook that I talked about earlier. It's something like that, where it's something I'm going to talk about at length another time, because I want to discuss them in videos, so I'm trying not to talk too much about them. But I wanted to mention that because that was another book I read that I liked quite a bit, and is, after Slaughterhouse-Five, probably my next favorite Vonnegut book. Next, I read Zorro, The Curse of Capistrano. Zorro, The Curse of Capistrano. I did not know until, I don't know, somewhat recently, a few months back, I didn't know that Zorro was a novel series. I thought it was, I don't know, I thought it was like sort of like a mythological thing that was turned into the films, and that they were just kind of cultural stories that were passed down. I didn't know Zorro takes place in the United States. It takes place in California, which I had no idea. And so I had just seen Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, so I was on kind of a high from that. I really enjoyed that film, and it got me thinking of Zorro again, because Antonio Banderas also played Zorro in 3 or 4 films, and I kind of wanted to see those, so I was like, oh, I should read the first Zorro book, not realizing that it has not been directly adapted into one of those more recent films, but films going back to like the 20s, which I think this image on the cover of it actually is actually based on one of the posters from one of those old adaptations of it from the 20s, because this novel also is much more recent than I expected, because when I found out it was novels, I figured it probably was from the 1800s or something, but no, it's from like the early 1900s. It's from like 1915 or something like that, so even more recent than I was expecting. Anyways, very, very easy read. It's not hard to understand at all. My copy was like 150 pages. Like, it's not a long story, but it actually really gripped me for the short time it had. How do I say this? It gripped me for the short time it had with me, because it was so short. There's action and romance, and Zorro is just a really fun and cool character. Every once in a while, you just need a story with a cool guy, And Zorro's a cool guy, and his double identity, secret identity situation going on is fun. Seeing how he interacts with characters when he is versus isn't, because unlike something like Spider-Man, where Peter Parker is interacting with his family and stuff, and then as Spider-Man, he's interacting with completely different people most of the time. He occasionally interacts with those people he interacts with as his normal identity. Zorro is a character who he interacts with. All the people he's interacting with are the same, regardless of the identity he's wearing at the time. So that contrast is much more clear, much more present throughout. and the romance element of it's fantastic. If you like Batman, you'll like this. It's not as dark as Batman, not even remotely, but Batman is a character that is based on Zorro, vigilante, masked vigilante hero, and the again has great humor and actually engaged me by its romance quite a bit. It's a bit old fashioned, but if you're looking for something light and something just kind of, just something kind of fun and flippant to go through really quick, I could highly recommend this. And you can find the text online. I believe it's in the public domain. Next, I read Death Note, Another Note, the Los Angeles BB murder cases. This is something I had been wanting to read for quite a while, but was having trouble tracking it down. And then it showed up on eBay for like less than $10, and I was like, I want to read this. I had just rewatched Death Note, the anime. I had just rewatched it with Monkey Paula because she had not seen it before, so I want her to see it. So we watched through the series, and she loved it. I loved it all over again. And I was just craving more Death Note at the time. I was watching the live action movies, even the American one, and just needed something else to keep going. So I decided to pick up this book because I had heard of it but wasn't overly interested in it until recently when I was on that kick. So I read it, breezed through it in like 2 or 3 days. Pretty short, only a couple hundred pages, and it's fun. It's nothing like that's going to grip you in the same way Death Note does. But if you're just looking for more time with certain characters, particularly Naomi and Elle, who are the main characters of this novel, you're going to be interested in it. You're going to enjoy it. I would recommend not looking anything up about it because you can easily get spoiled on something that will completely screw up a huge reveal later. Like I was, because I was hyper fixated on it, so I was researching a ton of stuff about all these things. So if you aren't into Death Note, though, you're not going to enjoy this. Well, you might get something out of it, but this is something that your attachment Death Note is going to dictate a lot of whether you're going to love it or not. And even as someone who loves Death Note, I just thought this was like pretty good. I probably won't read it again, but it was worth my time for the time it had me. Next, I read Lolita, Vladimir Nabokov. I'm probably saying these names wrong. That's why I didn't attempt to say the last name, which was just an alias. Last name being the author of the previous book, the Death Note one. Lolita. I wanted to read this because I had seen the Stanley Kubrick film. I don't know. I want to say 3 or 4 years ago at this point, and I was confused by it. There were things that I didn't get, things I did get, and I just was curious as to how faithful it was to the novel. And what I found was that it's somewhat faithful, somewhat not. There's some major changes made, but I this is another book I read with the audiobook, and while I was what I didn't when I started the audiobook, I was like, wow, this sounds like Jeremy Irons, and then found out it was the actor Jeremy Irons, who, if you don't know, is the actor who portrays like Scar in The Lion King, the original, that is. And I was like, oh, he's one of my favorite actors. Like, this is gonna be great. I did not realizing he is the actor who portrays the main character in the 1997 film, which I found some people have been mixed on. But I'll tell you, I watched the film after reading this, and I loved the 1997 film. I think I prefer it to the Kubrick one, actually. So if you're looking for an adaptation read, I'd recommend that one. It's a bit more faithful than the Kubrick one is. But anyway, back to the book. Book's gripping. It's not nearly as erotic as its reputation would lead you to believe. I think a lot of people think this is like a heavily sexualized, borderline pornographic book because of its subject matter. But no, it's kind of exploring how someone in that situation is making all these justifications to themselves. It's a character thing. And once you get past chapter, I want to say like 9, 10, 11, somewhere around there, that all kind of stops and everything's really revered to the background. It's not an erotic book. There's just a lot of stuff that's going to make you uncomfortable because of the subject matter. So if it's something you don't think you can stomach, totally respect that, totally understand that. But I was really engaged by the main character and found his dissent and his persuasion of himself to be very interesting and engaging. Not super long. I want to say it was like a little over 300 pages. If you're looking for something that's going to grip you character-wise, this is a great one. Just make sure that you're going to be able to stomach the content because it does get dark and disturbing. I read Watchmen by Alan Moore. This was recommended to me by Mello and Arcade because I was researching comics and comic books for a project I'm working on, and they told me that this was a great one to read. It was something I was interested in. I had seen the Zack Snyder film a few years back, but I didn't remember it all that well, so I was like, yeah, what the heck? I'll read this. I don't really remember the movie. And I really liked it. I plowed through it in 2 or 3 days, and it was very enjoyable. The characters are great. The art is gorgeous. Some really just beautiful coloring, which was done by a whole separate person. And I found it really engaging and a very interesting take. Probably the most interesting take I've seen on like the realistic depiction of a superhero. This was probably my favorite. I've not read a ton of comic books. I was never super into them. I tried to stray away from the term graphic novel. Just, they're comic books. There's nothing demeaning about being a comic book. And anyway, I haven't read a ton of comic books. I've read some. I was into the Bone series, and read some manga here and there, like Death Note and some of the Zelda mangas, but I'm not a super well-versed person in comics. So I was excited to try to read something from that, not genre, but that medium, since I hadn't done it in a while. And Alf actually lent me his copy, which I really enjoyed. So, yeah, if you haven't read Watchmen, I understand we're in this era of people really losing it to superhero fatigue, but if you're interested in something about superheroes, but more so about it in the conceptual sense, this is for you, because this was fantastic. It's not about action and crime fighting. This is about people as superheroes. There's even points where there are interludes where it's chapters from a fictional autobiography by one of the main character or by one of the characters who says, yeah, we kind of are embarrassed to run around in the costumes because the villain stopped doing it. It's very self-conscious in that way and self-aware, but self-aware in a good dramatic way, not self-aware in kind of a cheesy comedic way. So if you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend this. I really enjoyed it. Then finally, most recent book I read was The Pigman by Paul Zindel. I had never heard of this book, and then I started watching Chugga Conroy's newest Let's Play series he's doing right now at the time of recording this for Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. And he nicknamed his starter Pokemon Pignati after a character from this book. So I decided to check it out because I saw my local library had it. It was something I thought I was going to put off for a long time, but saw it was right there, saw it was really short, and was like, well, what the heck? And it is really short, like 150, 160 pages. It kind of has that Catcher in the Rye kind of vibe to it, because it's very much about teenage characters and about trying to capture how they speak in an accurate and truthful way, and this feels like it. And I really enjoyed it because it has like a little bit less angst than Catcher in the Rye. It's a little bit more lighthearted, though it still has that sort of cold feeling to it, like it feels like something you should read. It feels like something that's going to give you vibes of like January, if you get what I'm saying, or like fall. It has good autumnal / winter weather feels. The characters are very lovable. This story is short, but it'll grip you and break your heart. It didn't make me cry or anything like that, but it kept me engaged. And whenever I picked this up, I read it in like 2 or 3 sessions or something. And every time I picked it up, I ended up reading it much longer than I thought I was going to. So if you're looking for just something light like that, this sounds interesting to you, you'll probably like it. Anyway, those are all the books. Well, not all of them, but some of the books I've read recently, and I wanted to share those with you because some of you are missing this series. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys are interested, I can keep this series going here and there. Maybe make it a seasonal thing, just so I actually have more books to talk about. This was a longer episode because I had it had been so long since we'd done one of these. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. And oh yeah, wasn't there some video game thing related going on today? Who knows? Couldn't have been that important. See you guys later.